Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in a setting that has, I think, consumed the global imagination for generations.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about this dramatic stretch of ocean where, according to all the legends, the sky just eats planes and the sea swallows ships whole.
And not just swallows them, but often leaves nothing behind. No
Oh,
trace. Not a single piece of wreckage.
Not even a flicker of a distress signal.
It's the ultimate maritime and aerial mystery. We are, of course, talking about the area famously situated in the North Atlantic Ocean.
Right. Geographically, it's this massive inverted triangle west of Florida.
And its corners connect the island of Bermuda and then down to the island of Puerto Rico.
But it's the folklore, I think. The sheer folklore surrounding this area that truly sets it apart. The names themselves are just so evocative.
They tell you everything you need to know about the fear and fascination it inspires.
You hear things like the Limbo of the Lost, the terrifying Devil's Triangle, the Graveyard of the Atlantic.
The Sea of Doom, and even that older one, the Sargassusan Sea.
I mean, these are names that are just loaded with decades of dramatic mystery. Okay, let's unpack this. The fundamental question we're trying to address today is what exactly are the sources telling us about this legendary place?
Right. Is it truly some kind of supernatural sinkhole where the laws of physics are just suspended?
Or is it, as the skeptics would claim, simply a very, very cleverly marketed patch of busy ocean?
And our mission today is really to cut through that intense sensationalism.
So we're starting with the old folklore, the famous incidents.
Then moving into some of the wilder conspiracy theories, and then finally applying that rigorous scientific skepticism that aims to explain not just how the myth began, but why it still persists today.
So our goal is really to distill what truly defines the Bermuda Triangle phenomenon, how the legend was actually created, and maybe more importantly for you, the learner, what verifiable facts or credible scientific explanations exist for all these disappearances.
We want you to walk away with a balanced, non-overwhelming view, but equipped with the specific details that either debunk or at least explain the greatest hits of the myth.
And to do that properly, we really have to trace the lineage of the story, the birth of the legend.
Because the true foundation of the Bermuda Triangle isn't geographical at all.
It's literary.
Exactly. It's a story.
And the birth of that story, at least the modern version of it, is surprisingly recent.
It is. I mean, you had media chatter in the U.S. starting to focus on unexplained disappearances between Florida and Bermuda around the 1950s.
People were noticing a high concentration of incidents.
Right. But the area itself, it didn't really have a specific name, a moniker.
Not yet.
That formal naming, that whole conceptualization of it as a fixed, dangerous triangle didn't happen until 1964.
And that was from a writer named Vincent H. Gaddis, who published an article called The Deadly Bermuda Triangle.
And crucially, where was this piece published?
Not in a naval report or some scientific review. It was in Argosy, an American pulp fiction magazine. And this detail is absolutely key to understanding the nature of the entire mystery.
What's so fascinating here is that the foundation of the legend was fundamentally just entertainment. It was packaged for mass consumption.
Right.
Gaddis's article, I mean, it did catalog a lot of real vanishments that had been in the media for the last decade, but the piece itself was just intensely embellished.
How so?
He used fictitious quotes, alarming suppositions, and he deliberately manipulated the facts to maximize the drama.
You wouldn't look at a typical Argosy magazine cover with its spaceships and strange beasts and two-fisted adventures and expect a serious, sober analysis of maritime law, would you?
No, absolutely not. The piece was targeting an audience that wanted to be entertained by a mystery, not an audience that wanted to logically understand it.
And that's the crucial, defining takeaway for this whole phenomenon.
It is. The Bermuda Triangle, from its inception, from its very naming, was designed to be a mystery for mystery's sake.
And that sensationalized origin really established a tone that completely dominates the discussion, even today.
And once that tone was set, it allowed people to look backwards. Retrospectively applying the triangle label to centuries-old events to give the legend this deep antique history it didn't really have.
Which is why we have to start with arguably the oldest incident connected to the triangle, the voyages of Christopher Columbus.
Yes. Proponents of the myth, they love to cite Columbus's travel diary from his 1492 voyage as proof of the triangle's ancient, persistent power.
And they highlight 3 specific events, right?
They do. 3 reported events that supposedly signal the beginning of the whole phenomenon.
The first one is really dramatic. On September 15th, 1492, his crew saw a marvelous branch of fire that fell directly from the sky into the sea.
You can imagine, for a superstitious 15th century mariner, that would have been absolutely terrifying.
It sounds like the heavens are opening up.
Right. But invoking UFOs or supernatural fire is, a bit of a stretch when you have a much more likely explanation, a simple meteor.
How can we know that?
Well, we know that the Earth's orbit dictates peak meteor activity. And September, because of the planet's angle and path through space, is a very common month for observing spectacular shooting stars and fireballs. The sighting was on September 15th. It fits perfectly.
Okay, so a likely meteor. What about the second event they cite? This is the classic Bermuda Triangle trope, the compass malfunction.
Right. On September 17th, the crew noted their compass needle seemed misaligned with the North Star.
For a captain relying on celestial navigation, that would be deeply unnerving.
Of course, but the crucial piece of information that is so often conveniently disregarded when people retell the Columbus legend is the location.
They weren't in the triangle.
They weren't even close. Both the fireball sighting and that initial compass issue occurred outside the triangle, roughly in the middle of the North Atlantic. They were nowhere near the Bermuda, Florida, Puerto Rico area.
So the facts are stretched, or the initial location is just ignored to fit the narrative.
Precise.
Okay, what about the third event, the strange light? That one is more frequently associated with the area, isn't it?
It is, yes. That event, which happened later, was sighted within the general confines of the triangle. Columbus described it as a small wax candle that rose and lifted up.
Which sounds very mysterious.
It does, but here's the most important piece of evidence. Columbus himself never described it as inexplicable or supernatural or even dangerous. He recorded it as a hopeful sign.
Sign of what?
An indication of nearby land. Just a few hours after observing the light, a crewman spotted the American continent.
Ah.
So Columbus's own interpretation, which was validated by the sighting of land, suggests the light came from a nearby landmass. Maybe an indigenous torch, a bonfire, something like that.
So, in short, everything we know about Columbus's experience, when you put it in proper context, is completely explainable.
And it was never framed as a mystery by the man who actually witnessed it.
This really highlights an ongoing pattern. The history of the Bermuda Triangle is just predicated on taking complex, misunderstood, or geographically misplaced historical events and reframing them as mysterious.
Often by just disregarding the original witness's interpretation.
If you seek mystery, you will find it in the gaps of history.
Exactly. But even if the ancient history is a bit tenuous, the ghost ship stories are genuinely baffling, and they certainly fueled Gaddis's narrative in the 1960s.
Okay, let's start with the ghost ship that truly defines that sudden, total vanishing. The Ellen Austin, a story from the 1880s.
Right. This was a 210-foot, three-masted schooner traveling from England to New York, and its journey took it near the triangle.
And the captain, a man named Griffin, he spotted something strange.
He did. A small, completely empty schooner moving erratically with no purposeful navigation. He tried to make contact, got no response, so he boarded it.
And what did they find?
The vessel was perfectly sound, no damage, all the rigging was intact, cargo was untouched, but every single person was gone.
A spontaneous vanishing act. What did the Ellen Austin's crew do?
Well, they decided to salvage it. Captain Griffin believed it was too valuable to just leave behind, so he put a small prize crew aboard the mystery ship.
The idea being they'd sail it alongside the Ellen Austin back to New York?
Exactly. Claim the salvage rights, report the incident. Simple enough.
But the mystery ship wasn't going to give up its secrets that easily.
No. According to the accounts, a severe, violent storm hit, and the small boat was temporarily lost from sight. When the storm finally cleared, the mystery boat reappeared, still afloat, still undamaged. Good. But once again, it was completely empty. The crew members from the Ellen Austin who had transferred to the mysterious boat had also vanished, without a trace.
The idea that a single ship could claim two separate crews, both just vanishing without any damage to the vessel itself, that is undeniably terrifying.
It creates the image of something selectively removing human beings.
It's a baffling account. Though I imagine it's hard to verify through official records from that era.
Very difficult. We have to compare that level of mystery, to the far more documented case of the Mary Celeste in 1872.
The Mary Celeste left New York for Italy. It was heavily laden with industrial alcohol, had a full crew, and the captain's wife and daughter were on board.
Right, and about a month after disappearing, on December 4th, it was found floating about 400 miles east of the Azores, so a region adjacent to the eastern edge of the traditional triangle.
And the scene on board was surreal.
Completely. Dinner was still set on the table, plates and food intact, captain, crew, passengers, everyone was gone.
But the ship was still seaworthy.
Perfectly seaworthy, and the only item that was known for certain to be missing was the lifeboat.
Wait, if dinner was set, that suggests they left while preparing for a meal. So a sudden, unexpected event.
Well, if the lifeboat was missing, that suggests a quick planned evacuation.
That's the central paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Investigators widely hypothesize that some onboard emergency, maybe a dangerous flare-up of the alcohol cargo, or a sudden catastrophic noise from the hull, caused the captain to order a rapid evacuation into the lifeboat.
And if they were subsequently lost at sea in that small boat, that would explain their disappearance.
It would. But the sources also noted there were allegations of potential insurance fraud surrounding the Mary Celeste.
Right, the vessel had a complicated history of ownership changes and insurance policies.
Indeed. So while the vast majority of theories lean toward maritime misfortune, the presence of those financial allegations, it just muddies the waters.
And the completely inexplicable nature of the Ellen Austin provides endless room for supernatural speculation.
These ghost ships represent the first phase of the myth-making, the sea as a selective devourer.
And this theme of a sudden, overwhelming catastrophe that allows no time for reaction, it's replicated in the most tragic vanagements of the 20th century. I think the one that shook the U.S. public the hardest was the disappearance of the USS Cyclops.
The Cyclops incident in 1918 was an enormous wartime loss. This was a massive collier, a U.S. Navy cargo ship carrying manganese ore, along with 306 people, sailors, and troops.
And it vanished without a trace en route from the West Indies to Baltimore.
306 people gone, right at the height of World War I. That's a huge political and emotional vacuum.
The size of the ship alone, sinking should have generated massive debris and required serious force.
Absolutely. And what made the silence so critical was the technology. The ship was equipped with a pretty sophisticated distress signal facility for the time.
Designed for communicating threats like German U-boats or piracy, which were genuine concern.
Exactly. Yet no message, no SOS was ever sent.
That silence is deafening. For a ship that size, with that many trained personnel, that implies whatever happened, it must have struck instantaneously.
It couldn't have been a slow leak or gradual storm damage.
Right.
It implies that whatever natural or mechanical failure occurred, it was so catastrophic and so sudden that nobody on board, from the crew to the command, had the split second required to react and transmit.
The disappearance of the Cyclops remains the single largest loss of life in U.S. naval history that's not directly attributable to combat. Its fate is officially unresolved.
Which creates an irresistible void for the mythmakers to fill.
And we see this same instantaneous failure pattern replicated in the air with the tragic story of the two sister planes, the Star Ariel and the Star Tiger.
Right, belonging to the British South American Airways. They vanished a year apart, both near the Triangle.
The Star Tiger went first in January 1948. It was approaching Bermuda from the Azores.
And the weather was notoriously poor. Heavy winds and rain had pushed the plane off course just an hour before its last transmission. The initial investigation expressed, well, extreme bafflement. They noted that no problem so profound had ever been presented.
But when you dig deeper, the sources reveal some mitigating factors. The plane was known to be poorly maintained.
It had unrectified defects. That's the key context that's often lost in the supernatural retelling.
What kind of defects?
The specific model of plane had a history of issues with its cabin heater. Experts theorized that a leak in the hydraulic vapor lines could have occurred near the hot heater, leading to instant combustion or a mid-air explosion.
So while hard evidence was never recovered because of the rough seas, there was a plausible, natural explanation rooted in maintenance failure.
Yes. But then, exactly a year later, in January 1949, the Star Ariel vanishes, this time flying from Bermuda toward Jamaica.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the circumstances were seemingly pristine.
They were the complete opposite of the Star Tiger. The Star Ariel vanished in excellent weather-clear skies, high visibility. The pilot was highly experienced, and the plane was reported to be in good working condition before departure.
And just like the Cyclops, and just like its sister plane.
No evidence of a crash, no debris, and no distress call was ever made.
So you have two virtually identical vanishments, separated by a year, involving identical planes, one in a storm with known mechanical problems, one in perfect weather with no apparent issues.
It's the perfect setup for proponents of the myth to argue that a singular, mysterious force must be at work, a force that transcends weather and maintenance.
And that force, that narrative, It found its definitive moment in history just a few years earlier with the incident that became the absolute catalyst for the entire Bermuda Triangle phenomenon.
Flight 19.
The disappearance of Flight 19 in December 1945 is the narrative bedrock of the entire mythology. This wasn't a commercial carrier, it was a routine training flight.
A squadron of 5 U.S. Navy Avenger torpedo bombers carrying 14 men departing from Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Their mission was pretty standard stuff, a navigational exercise, some bombing practice near Grand Bahama.
And the flight was led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced instructor, though he was, and this is important, unfamiliar with this particular route over the Bahamas.
They departed around 2:00 p.m. About 2 hours in, after they'd finished their bombing run, the trouble began.
The weather, which had been clear, started to deteriorate, and Taylor decided to abort the mission and return to base.
But then he reported an instrument failure of staggering proportions.
Both of his compasses had failed. And when he checked with his 4 student pilots, it turned out all the compasses on all 5 planes were malfunctioning.
Just imagine that, 14 men flying over open water with no reliable navigation home.
Ground control was tracking them, trying to guide them back, and the intercepted radio logs give us one of the most agonizing insights into a disaster ever recorded.
And they clearly show that the core failure wasn't just the instruments.
No. It was human error rooted in a fatal geographical confusion.
That's the vital analytical point. Taylor, the instructor, took command, but his mental map of the area was compromised.
How so?
Well, Taylor had previously been an instructor at the Naval Air Station in Miami, where the training exercises consistently took place over the Florida Keys. He was far more familiar with that geography.
And the sources confirm the terrible error he made. He mistook the string of islands they were flying over in the Bahamas for the Florida Keys.
The radio logs are the smoking gun on this one.
Absolutely. Taylor was heard transmitting, "Both my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down."
He was mentally back at his old base. He even mistakenly used his old call sign, MT-28, which was for Miami torpedo bomber.
Instead of the correct one, FT-28 for Fort Lauderdale.
And this geographical mistake just seals their fate. Because he thought he was in the Keys, he believed that flying west would lead him into the vast, unpopulated expanse of the Gulf of Mexico.
Which he saw as dangerous for a forced ditching.
And that is the absolute tragic irony of Flight 19.
If they had simply turned west, they would have hit the Florida coast in minutes and saved their lives.
Instead, he directed the flight north and then east,
flying them further and further away from safety and into the open, turbulent Atlantic.
As the sun set, the confusion just escalated. The pilots started arguing over the radio about the correct direction, and the failing instruments just made it worse.
The logs portray absolute desperation. They were running low on fuel, visibility was dropping, the sea below was growing violent.
And Taylor, realizing the severity of the situation, instructed them to fly in close formation. He said, "When one plane drops to 10 gallons of gas, all planes will land together." He was planning for a synchronized ditching,
He later suggested flying due east until we run out of gas.
which shows his final desperate hope that by flying east towards the trade lanes, they might increase their chance of being spotted by a ship.
Even though they were sacrificing their proximity to the U.S. mainland.
The final transmissions just capture the complete exhaustion. You hear things like, have to land on water unless landfall, and we may have to ditch any minute.
And shortly after 7 p.m., their signals weakened. 5 hours after takeoff, the 5 Avengers vanished.
And if the loss of 5 planes and 14 men wasn't enough to secure the myth's longevity, the second tragedy occurred almost immediately.
A search and rescue flying boat, designated ST-49, was immediately dispatched with 13 crewmen.
And it vanished after a routine departure transmission, bringing the total loss to 6 planes and 27 airmen.
The disappearance of a search and rescue vessel during the search itself, that makes for an unbelievably compelling piece of the mystery.
But in the case of ST-49, the evidence is far clearer than is often acknowledged in the myth-making books.
It is. The sources confirm that just 23 minutes after ST-49 took off, a tanker ship reported seeing a plane catch fire and explode upon impact with the ocean.
Explosion.
A huge one. The resulting flames were immense, rising 30 meters high and continuing for several minutes.
And did the ST-49 have known issues?
It did. Investigators knew that while the pre-flight checks had been superficially clean, the plane had went aground the day before because of a malfunctioning engine.
So it required an inspection of the hull.
Right. The explosion sighting, the debris and oil slick that were found later, combined with the knowledge of mechanical issues, it all strongly suggests ST-49 just combusted and exploded due to a highly volatile mechanical failure.
Probably related to fuel vapor or a faulty engine igniting right after takeoff.
It's the most likely scenario.
So the reality is, Flight 19 was a devastating case of human error, navigational failure, fuel starvation, and ST-49 was almost certainly a mechanical failure.
Yet, the enduring mystery is the complete lack of wreckage found for the Flight 19 squadron. It just leaves this massive void for the narrative to fill.
And that void led directly to the pinnacle of conspiracy, moving far beyond simple mechanical failure or bad navigation.
Let's look at the Carroll A. Deering incident from 1921. This story is fascinating because the ship actually made it through the Triangle, only to become a major ghost ship mystery further north.
Right. The Carroll A. Deering, a 5-masted sailing vessel, left Barbados, sailed through the Bermuda area without incident. But less than 3 weeks later, in January 1921, she was sighted run aground near North Carolina's notorious Diamond Shoals.
The graveyard of the Atlantic in its own right, and it was completely abandoned.
The details of the abandonment are what set this apart from a typical ghost ship. It wasn't just empty, it was clearly sabotaged.
Indeed. When the Coast Guard boarded, they found multiple critical items missing or destroyed. The ship's logbook, all crew personal belongings, key navigation equipment, all gone.
And 2 lifeboats and 2 anchors were missing.
And most bizarrely, the steering wheel appeared to have been intentionally destroyed, possibly with a sledgehammer.
Why would someone destroy the steering wheel? That suggests deep malice, or maybe the deliberate attempt to cripple the ship to prevent pursuit.
The primary theory at the time, which was later supported by the U.S. State Department and the FBI, was foul play, most likely a mutiny that turned violent.
Is there evidence for that?
There is. Investigators knew the relationship between the captain and the first mate was highly strenuous. The first mate had reportedly threatened the captain, saying he would get him before they reached Virginia.
And the evidence suggests the crew had taken control. A man who hailed the lightship near the shoals just before the Deering ran aground was not the captain.
He was described as a red-headed man with a Scandinavian accent, which matched the description of one of the Danish crewmen.
So that points strongly to an internal conflict spiraling out of control.
It does, and it's worth noting the hoax element here too. That famous message in a bottle found months later claiming piracy had occurred. Handwriting experts proved it was written by the very man who claimed to have found it.
Huh.
But the shadow of conspiracy remains because of one final eerie piece of circumstantial evidence. A large black steamship was seen sailing rapidly in the Deering's wake.
And when the lightship hailed it,
The steamship ignored the hail, unfurled a canvas to cover its nameplate, and sped away.
that act, covering the nameplate and ignoring a distress zone, that suggests a cover-up or definite criminal involvement.
Whether it was the crew of that ship involved in the mutiny or actual piracy that day, we don't know. But it shows how easily human intrigue can be mistaken for the paranormal when the full story is missing.
So now we transition from mutiny and mechanical failure to the most compelling survivor story, one that truly pushes the narrative into the supernatural. The flight of pilot Bruce Gernon in 1970.
Gernon's account is critical because he is one of the few individuals who survived and returned after encountering the most extreme phenomena alleged to occur in the Triangle.
He was a regular pilot on that route, right? The 250 miles from the Bahamas to Miami, a journey that typically took him about 90 minutes.
Exactly, and the incident began when he was flying above 10,000 feet. The weather was clear, but he encountered something unique. A massive, dense cloud formation that was completely unlike any typical thunderhead.
He described it as intensely dark, blocking out the sun, but it wasn't windy or raining.
And critically, he observed the cloud began to form an unmistakable cylindrical shape and started spinning rapidly. A vortex.
So he flew into this strange vortex. What happened then?
The immediate consequence was total navigational failure. His compass systems began spinning wildly, and he felt what he described as an invisible power, pushing his plane forward with incredible force.
He managed to escape the cylinder through a narrow, closing gap. And when he contacted ground staff, they told him he had arrived in Miami airspace.
And the subsequent shock was immense. The 90-minute journey had been completed in only 45 minutes.
An impossible speed, given his plane maxed out at about 180 miles per hour.
And the fuel consumption was impossibly low, suggesting the plane hadn't just flown faster, it had effectively skipped half the journey.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Gurnon's impossible journey leads directly to the core of the non-scientific explanations people use to make sense of the triangle. Because how else do you explain an impossible speed boost and navigational chaos?
These theories are incredibly compelling because they solve the paradoxes, like the star aerial in clear weather, with an exotic answer. Our sources identify three primary conspiracy concepts.
The first one is the Atlantis City theory. This gained traction after a 1969 book, The Mystery of Atlantis, linked the vanished city to the triangle.
Right. Proponents suggest that Atlantis was an advanced underwater civilization that sunk in the area. Their surviving technology, often described as powerful energy crystals or some kind of residual energy grid, periodically activates.
And this creates electromagnetic disruptions or energy fields that intentionally sink or vanish vessels passing above.
It explains the sheer scale of the vanishments with a technologically advanced power source.
Then we have the extraterrestrial civilization theories.
This is the simplest explanation for a disappearance without a trace. Aliens, or some form of advanced non-human entity, lives under the sea beneath the triangle and is responsible for collecting the ships and planes. This links back to all those 1950s media reports of UFO sightings in the region.
And finally, the time travel or wormhole concept.
Popularized in a 2010 book by Peter Engelman, this theory suggests that the severe electromagnetic fields in the area, maybe from natural geology or those Atlantis crystals, create temporary wormholes, shortcuts in space-time.
And this is where the theory gains a sort of pseudoscientific gravitas by referencing known physics.
Yes. The concept connects to Albert Einstein's theoretical work on space-time and gravitational fields, which suggested that if wormholes could be created, they would function as conduits, allowing matter to travel across vast distances or even through time.
And Gurnon's experience is offered as proof.
Exactly. His plane didn't fly half the distance. It was transported through a spatial shortcut, explaining the impossible time and the low fuel usage.
While these concepts make for spectacular books, and they all require a massive suspension of verified scientific law. So we have to now turn to the skeptical view and ask the essential question: is this area even uniquely dangerous at all?
That is the essential cold water check the learner needs. And statistically, the answer is a resounding negative. The Bermuda Triangle is not listed in the world's top 10 most dangerous shipping regions.
In fact, the U.S. Navy, which flies and sails through the area constantly, doesn't even recognize the name Bermuda Triangle.
It's officially considered an urban legend, a sensationalized myth lacking any formal factual basis.
But we have to acknowledge the traffic volume. It connects major continental points, Florida, the Caribbean, Europe, via Bermuda. It's one of the world's most heavily trafficked air and sea lanes.
And if you have more traffic, you will naturally have more incidents. But the crucial measure is the rate of incidents compared to global maritime traffic.
And when you look at the hard data, the myth just falls apart. Lloyd's List, which tracks global ship casualties meticulously, provides some stunning context.
The global vessel casualty rate is about 1.8% annually.
Contrast that with the specific data from the Bermuda Triangle area. Our sources indicate that out of 8,634 passing ships studied in a relevant period, only 2 casualties were officially recorded.
That is statistically negligible. It completely undermines the idea that this area possesses some unique, irresistible hazard zone.
And this issue of narrative hype over statistical data leads us to compare it to the world's other alleged paranormal triangles.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we find striking parallels with the Dragon's Triangle, or the Devil's Sea, which is located near Japan, specifically around Miyake Island.
What's significant about that?
The Dragon's Triangle shares a similar latitude with the Bermuda Triangle, and it has an identical history of mysterious vanishings and unsettling pilot reports.
For instance, in 1945, there was an A-60 aircraft flying over the Devil's Sea when the pilot's final chilling message was transmitted. Something is happening in the sky is opening up.
That is highly reminiscent of the Flight 19 and Bruce Gernon accounts. Another example is the 1980 vanishing of the massive British bulk carrier, the MV Derbyshire.
The incidents are functionally identical: a large vessel vanishing without warning, or a pilot reporting strange atmospheric phenomena.
So the conclusion is inescapable. The Bermuda Triangle is simply far more famous, not because it's inherently more dangerous than other high-traffic, weather-prone zones, but because Western publishing, Hollywood, and the resulting tourism industry have focused their economic and narrative attention there.
They've created a strong market around the myth.
Exactly.
So if statistics and global comparisons debunk the idea of a uniquely dangerous zone, we have to apply the hard science to the incidents that do happen. And we have three compelling scientific explanations from the source material that account for the various air and sea disappearances.
The first and most easily explained phenomenon addresses the magnetic failure experienced by Columbus and, critically, by Flight 19, magnetic declination and the Agonic Line.
Okay, let's unpack this for the learner. Navigation requires understanding the difference between true north, which is the Earth's geographic pole, and magnetic north, which is what a compass actually points to.
Right. A compass needle is always aligned with the magnetic field. The Agonic Line is the specific, constantly shifting, invisible line on Earth, where true north and magnetic north align perfectly.
So if you're standing on the Agonic Line, your compass points exactly to the geographic North Pole.
Correct. And why this is so important for the Bermuda Triangle is that for centuries, the center of this Agonic Line has historically passed directly through the region we define as the Bermuda Triangle.
And while the line shifts over time.
Its historical presence there means that this was one of the few places in the world where navigators couldn't simply rely on adding or subtracting a constant declination factor.
So if you were crossing the triangle, especially in the 1940s, like the Flight 19 pilots, you would suddenly experience wildly erratic and unreliable compass readings that required complex, high-level manual adjustments.
Precisely. This condition generates extreme navigational errors, errors that an experienced pilot like Taylor, relying on instinct and his old familiar geography, compounded into a fatal error.
And modern GPS and radar, which use satellites, have effectively solved this problem.
Which is a major reason why these specific types of navigational disappearances are now so rare.
Okay, the second explanation addresses the catastrophic, instantaneous vanishing of large ships, like the USS Cyclops, which vanished too quickly to send a distress signal.
Right. This is the methane hydrate eruptions theory.
And the geological evidence is clear. The seabed in this area contains substantial methane hydrate fields.
This is methane gas that's naturally trapped under the ocean floor, often due to high pressure and low temperature, forming an ice-like cage structure.
What triggers an eruption?
It could be a seismic shift, volcanic activity, or even a rapid temperature change that destabilizes the hydrate fields. When that happens, the trapped methane erupts, creating massive gas bubbles that rise violently and rapidly through the water.
This sounds dramatic, but how does a bubble sink a 306-person warship?
Here is the crucial mechanism which was proven in those Australian experiments. When that rising gas mixes with the water, it significantly reduces the water's density.
So the water's no longer thick enough to support the vessel.
Exactly. The research found that if a ship is floating on a patch of water that suddenly loses its density due to gas saturation, the vessel loses buoyancy instantly and catastrophically. It plunges straight down.
Immediately, without allowing time for a distress call.
This mechanism perfectly explains the sudden, total vanishing of ships like the Cyclops, leaving no debris behind because the sinking is just too rapid.
And finally, we have an explanation for the most dramatic air incidents. Planes being crushed in clear skies or accelerating impossibly fast, like Bruce Gernon's flight.
And this is hexagonal clouds and air bombs. It's a remarkable finding based on modern satellite data.
In 2016, a scientific team from the University of Colorado analyzed satellite images of the area and discover the presence of these unusual, massive hexagonal cloud shapes.
Sometimes spanning over 50 kilometers across the ocean surface. These are not your typical storm clouds.
What makes these hexagonal clouds so dangerous?
Their structure and behavior. Scientists found that these clouds act effectively like atmospheric air bombs. The hexagonal shape indicates high atmospheric instability, and they generate extreme, localized, high-velocity airflows called microbursts.
How fast are we talking?
They generate downdrafts and wind speeds that can reach up to 175 miles per hour or 250 kilometers per hour. These powerful winds descend vertically from the cloud base,
And they can instantaneously crush and collapse an aircraft.
explaining why no wreckage is ever found. The plane is forced into the sea at an extreme destructive velocity.
And this is a perfect science-based explanation for sudden air disappearances in clear weather, like the Star Ariel. But can we connect this back to Gernon's impossible flight?
We absolutely can. If a plane flies with one of these extremely powerful winds, not caught in a crushing downdraft, but caught on the forward edge of the lateral flow, it explains the impossible speed boost.
So the aircraft is essentially carried along by a massive localized jet stream.
It accelerates the aircraft far beyond its maximum capacity, allowing Grinnan to make his 90-minute journey in 45 minutes with minimal fuel use. The invisible power he felt was simply the sheer force of the microburst wind.
The synthesis of all this scientific data is remarkably comprehensive. Dr. Ka's research at Sydney University, which analyzed the area thoroughly, concluded that accidents in the Bermuda Triangle are overwhelmingly attributable to a specific combination of identifiable factors.
And those factors are not a single supernatural force, but a convergence of three distinct natural threats. Persistent human error, often compounded by panic, known severe weather like hurricanes, and these unpredicted, localized high-wind atmospheric situations like the Hex clouds.
All of this is amplified by the high traffic volume and the unique challenge posed by the agonic line.
The sheer variety of the reported incidents, some in clear weather, some in massive storms involving an magnetic failure, probable mutiny, mechanical issues, it all strongly suggests that the mystery is nothing more than an aggregation of diverse, natural, and human incidents over centuries.
All just clustered into a single compelling narrative.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Bermuda Triangle is the classic textbook example of how a deeply sensationalized narrative built on embellished fiction and the aggregation of unverified century-old data points can easily outweigh verifiable facts and simple science in the public mind.
So to recap, we've established the modern legend was built on Gaddis's Pulp Fiction article in Argosy. We've shown that the primary mysteries are either geographically debunked, like Columbus, or scientifically explained. Flight 19 was a devastating confluence of human error and instrument failure due to the agonic line.
And we now have compelling, proven scientific explanations that account for virtually all the phenomena previously labeled supernatural. Magnetic declination caused navigational chaos. Methane gas explains the instantaneous sinking of ships, and hexagonal air bombs explain planes being crushed or impossibly accelerated in clear skies. The mystery really does fade when you introduce the hard data.
The Bermuda Triangle legend thrives because, well, people find the drama of a supernatural sinkhole far more satisfying than the boring reality of studying atmospheric physics or seismic geology.
And let's face it, the economy built on the books, movies, documentaries, and tourism that surrounds this myth is powerful enough to keep the story alive indefinitely.
So what does this all mean? The question for you is this. If the mystery is composed of such a perfect storm of diverse scientific explanations, geology, atmosphere, magnetism, and human psychology, does the persistence of the mystery actually teach us more about the human desire for the supernatural?
And maybe the comfort found in a compelling narrative than it does about the actual geography of the North Atlantic.
It proves that a great story, particularly one that leaves a tantalizing vacuum of information, will always have greater traction than a meticulous accident report.
The most mysterious part of the Bermuda Triangle is not the ocean itself, but our own relentless need to believe.
This was all for today. Stay happy, stay safe, comment your views down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. See you next time with another story in Deep Dive.